Welcome to Shift, a college admissions ACT, SAT, and CLT podcast for a changing world. I'm Tyler, founder of Achievable, and we have an affordable ACT and CLT courses that include everything you need to ace your exam. A full textbook, tons of review questions backed by our memory-enhancing algorithm, videos on key topics, a built-in study planner, and full-length practice exams. You can get a free trial at achievable.me, and if you like it, use the code podcast to get 10% off. Now, let's get started. Today, I've got Teege Mettille with EnrollML and the admissions counselor's Malaise, and he told me it was okay if I mispronounced his name, but, if you could please say that again for the people at home, I'd appreciate it.
Absolutely. It's Teege Mettille, and I accept any variation of that. Teege, I've heard it all, so anything is fine with me.
Yeah, great. Could you introduce your company and your book real quick?
Absolutely. So I am the Director of Enrollment Success at EnrollML, which is an ed tech company that helps admissions counselors on college campuses connect with the right students at the right time. Additionally, I wrote the book, The Admissions Counselor Malaise, available on Amazon, that focuses specifically on the staff morale challenges in college admissions offices over the last 5 to 10 years, which I think will inform today's conversation very well.
Yeah, great. Yeah, so I think to start things off, right, as you write about in the admissions counselor's Malaise, right, it's tough out there. So how is it tough? Why is it tough? Kind of like there's been so many changes. I think the Common App was a major shift in the admissions process, and now we've got AI, and there's all kinds of other considerations going on. But I'm curious, like, what are the big things that have changed? Like, what's new?
Yep. Yeah, and this is something I kind of sort through in the book. And the short version, right, the real quick version is over time, colleges have just been getting more and more applications per admissions counselor, which means admissions counselors have had to spend less and less time with each student that's applying relative to previous years. And so that creates a challenge, a staff morale challenge that's creating, is because admissions counselors are driven to this work. They're very mission driven. And the reason they picked this job, the reason they were excited was not to increase enrollment or meet net tuition revenue goals or increase the standing of their alma mater's class. Almost to a person, and I mean that's not an exaggeration, almost to a person, if you find an admissions counselor and ask them what they love about their work, why they wanted to do it, it's some variation of, I want to help students, right? Mm-hmm. They're usually very connected to the institution they work for. Their own college experience was often very impactful on their life, and they want to play a role in helping other students who come after them find their way through it. So when you have folks, energetic, outgoing, effervescent, people, working in admissions offices that want to help students, and you just keep larding on more and more and more and more applications, the job slowly becomes more about going through data and spreadsheets and kind of mining signals of interest, and less about getting to know the students you're working with, and most importantly, from the admissions counselor perspective, getting to feel the impact your work is having.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, I think in particular, it's very easy to see a world, particularly, we talked about in the AI episode how, AI is doing most of the essay reading, right? It's easy to see a world where you feel like you're not interacting with the students directly at all.
Mm-hmm. Oh, for sure. And part of the challenge, and again, I understand why this happened, and I sorted through it in the book, but families don't care. But colleges and universities are accidentally turning their measurements of success for admissions counselors not on the students they impact, but on the enrollment numbers that they bring in. And that's not only is it not motivating to an admissions counselor, it's demotivating to an admissions counselor, right? They don't want to feel like the reason for their work is to help an institutional budget somewhere. They want to feel like the reason for their work is the people behind it that they get to help and make an impact for.
Yeah. And I think it also is like, it's different work, right? Like it's more kind of, I don't know, like rote routine work than like thoughtful work.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, with EnrollML, because this is part of the solution, or part of the problem we solve, is this mass amount of applications that admissions counselors end up just spending insane amounts of time working through data and analysis projects that they're not prepared for, interested in, or particularly good at, right? All three things kind of come together. Um, but we did a qualitative time study where I worked with 22 different institutions and surveyed and interviewed, right? Qualitative interviews, the admissions leaders about all the work that goes into recruiting a class of students. And I went item by item. I said, what do you expect your admissions counselor to do for this? Like specifically, how do you expect them to put together a calling list? How much time do you expect to spend them on the phone? What do you want them to do with the student before they visit? Kind of all the way through, and did a measurement of how much time that should take. And what we found from those studies is that, for at least for this subset, it was almost a third of an admissions counselor's time at work in a year was spent on data wrangling and management. That is before they talk to a single student. They spend 2.5 hours each day in spreadsheets, in queries, kind of doing data work, analyzing website activity, things like that. And that's just not what admissions counselors are constitutionally situated for. And so it's draining work, it's rote work, and it's particularly unrewarding for them.
Right. Yeah. Well, so now, like, I feel like there's probably another part of it too, which is, you're dealing with kind of just the overwhelm of everything from the Common App, making it really easy to apply to a million things, and also like, AI making it so like everybody's kind of cranks out an essay. How
Mm-hmm.
do I guess just like what are kind of the ways that like admissions counselors are starting to address these challenges? And then I'd love to get into kind of, if you're a parent listening to this, like what does that mean for you?
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, admissions counselors are not addressing this, right? That's part of the problem, and they need the leadership in their office to kind of lead the way. So admissions counselors are just suffering through it and are turning over and leaving their jobs in rapid rates beyond what we've seen, at least in a generation in admissions. It used to be, if you had an admissions counselor in August, you could expect that same person to be there in May and June. And that's just not the case anymore. Admissions counselors are leaving any time of year. We have, I was just working with an institution that has a couple new admissions counselors starting now in February, even though students are in financial aid season and making final decisions.
Right.
So that's how admissions counselors are handling it. But what that means for parents is, and students, but I imagine more parents than high school seniors are listening to this, is when you're working with an admissions office, you can and should and probably need to be intentional about initiating conversations with your admissions counselor. That's how the subheading for this particular episode is, how do you get the most out of your admissions counselor?
Right.
Is make sure that they get to know you, even if you need to take charge of that, and that they can understand how them working with you is going to impact your life, right? Help them see how you as a student kind of being guided to their institution through their hard work and their effort is going to make a positive impact on your life. They will react positively to that. That's what they want to do in this work. And the more you can do to show them that, the happier they'll be, and the more time you'll get with them.
Right. Well, and I mean, what are some, I guess, like more like that? It's that as a strategy totally makes sense. But what are like some tactical ways to do that? Because what I
Absolutely.
remember from the college admissions process is it kind of felt like you were firing your application into a void. And that was it. Like you sent it and it was done, right? So what are is it in how you craft the application? Is there more interaction now and like following up with the admissions office or things like that? Or what are the ways that you can do that?
Yeah, think beyond the application itself, because there's a lot of gamesmanship goes into that. Definitely, don't feel like you shouldn't add your own gamesmanship to the application, but it's more than that. Anytime you get an email from the institution, reply to it. Is just one real thing, and ask a very simple kind of follow-up question. What does this mean for business majors? Or I'm very interested in hearing more about this club or activity that this email is about, or please give me more information, or connect me with the students, etc. Just kind of showing interest. Now, and again, I want to be clear.
It's
For
tough.
the
It's
highly
tough to not
selective
like make it fake, right? I'm sure that's the key thing.
Of course, but even making it fake is better than not doing it.
Oh,
Is
interesting. Okay.
the short of it from this perspective, with the exception. And again, I want to be clear. I'm not speaking to like secret strategies to get into Yale. I do not know them. I do not have them. This is not one of them, right?
Right.
So, someone once asked me about advice I was giving, like, well, what do you think about the Ivy League colleges? And my answer is just, I don't think about the Ivy League colleges. And so.
Huh.
When I'm talking, I really am kind of reflecting back the vast majority of colleges and universities. What is going to help you not really stand out? It's not so much about standing out in order to get admitted. That seems to be the questions that come with the Ivy League colleges. This is, how do you stand out in an applicant pool, not to get admitted, but to get attention and guidance and support. And doing some of the things I'm suggesting are how you do it. How most admissions counselors view their work when you say, have you reached out to students today? Usually what they mean is they take one email, they batch it out to 50 to 250 students, and they wait to see who replies, and then they spend time talking with the students who reply. And so being one of the students who reply, especially if it's related to the content of the message that was just sent, is how you're going to bubble up on their radar, so that when they're thinking about who to invite to the admitted student day, or who to follow up with, or who to pass along additional opportunities about. Maybe it's a scholarship, maybe it's a on-campus day, or a regional event in your city. You're going to be one of the people the admissions counselor is thinking about, because of the hundreds of applications that they have, you're one of the dozens of students that they know.
Interesting. Yeah, and I think, we were talking earlier about like tiebreakers, right? I feel like it could also definitely be a tiebreaker. It's like, okay, well, this person, because at the end of the day, the other key metric that admissions counselors have to optimize for is what I guess it's called enrollment rate, right? It's basically like, if you admit 5 people and 4 of them show up, your enrollment rate is 80%. And so, somebody who's been chatting with you consistently is obviously more likely to enroll, or at least that would, I think, be the assumption.
You're spot on. The yield rate, we call it.
Yield rate.
In
Okay.
the admissions business. Yep. So and the average yield rate, again, not counting the Ivies, but the average yield rate for most institutions is around 12 to 14%. For some, it's much lower, because students are applying to more than 8 colleges on average. Mathematically, there's just a limit to how many colleges they can enroll at. So when an admissions counselor is working with a student who seems very engaged and interested, again, they're more likely to spend time with that student, because that student is more likely to come through, and they're less likely to feel like they're banging the head against the wall.
Right. Great. Yeah, and so I think just like, other than, doing more follow-up, right, which I think is a good tip, right, are there things that parents should be thinking about or doing even like as part of the application itself?
Sure. I would just make the distinction. Depends what type of institution we're referring to, is how true this advice can land for them.
Right.
But as a general rule, making yourself available and aware and visible to the admissions counselor is how you're going to help yourself the most. If you are a student who is you're concerned about being admitted to an institution, or it's not a clear case based on what you can see online with their previous admit standards, I would say being proactive with the admissions counselor. I mean, they're going to see your transcript, so you don't need to like try and hide it and hope they don't notice the blip on your grades your sophomore year.
Right.
Reach out to the admissions counselor and say, we are really interested, and I am very concerned about how the year that he had this happen in his life, or that he kind of lost focus in high school, or she was in a rough spot because she was injured on the volleyball team, or whatever the case is, right? To bring that to any challenges or questions or concerns you have, to bring it directly to the admissions counselor. They are there because they want to help you, right? So even at some of the more selective institutions, admissions counselors feel protective of their students. They want to like stand up for them and speak out for them when they can. And so letting them know your story and your background proactively will help.
For sure. Yeah. And then I guess, are there other things about this whole sort of transformation of the admissions counseling environment and, how to take advantage of it that you feel like we haven't covered yet that you want to make sure we cover?
I think yes, I would say this, being mindful that admissions counselors are overwhelmed with the number of applications that they have,
Mm-hmm.
and that's going to impact how they connect and relate to you. Is just a way you can bring a little bit of kindness to your admissions counselor, which will come back to you tenfold.
Mm-hmm.
So, even if if the admissions counselor happens to call you, just taking a moment to say, some version of like, thanks, I'm sure you're calling a lot of students, and I'm so glad that you took time to talk with me today, will go a long way.
Right. Yeah. Well, that'll go a long way. And also, like, I think it's just in general, like making them feel seen, I guess, in their job. Like, these are humans too.
Yep.
Right. So yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. At the end of the day, if for most admissions counselors, if they had to choose between being loyal to their institution and being loyal to their students, I think I can't back this up with statistics or data. I think most would say their students. I think most feel more connected and loyal to their students than their institution. So connect with them, make sure they know you're on their side, you're with them, and you want to get to know them as well, or at least you want them to get to know you, and you'll have an advocate in the admissions office for you.
For sure. And do you feel like that affects the essay at all, or is I mean, the essay is the essay to an extent, and like obviously you should talk about yourself, and obviously you should try to endear yourself to whoever's reading it. But do you feel like there are any specific things, like specific tactics that maybe come up because of this, shift in the dynamic?
Yes. So there's the biggest thing I would say, and it comes with a huge note of caution, is let them know about a character trait that you have, especially if it's related to persistence or resilience, right? So that helps. Now, the flip of it, I had, on my podcast that is really for admissions directors. We had an admissions director say he just can't handle the trauma dumping essays anymore. So be mindful not to overdo it, because we hear a lot of really traumatic life stories in those essays. And while I don't say this dismissively, but while losing a big game or not getting the parts or the solo or something may have been a real like setback for you that you had to overcome. So I'm not saying don't write about it, but just keep it in context. Keep it in context. That's not the most dramatic thing that could have happened to someone your age.
Well, and also like like this again, it's like hard not to talk about this in a way that doesn't sound like super cynical, but like someone out there who's writing an essay to the same school definitely had something worse happen to them. And like, so like maybe just like, like obviously if like someone close to you like died or something terrible, like, I mean, then you should give it the gravity it deserves. But if you lost the championship game of your sports league, whatever, right? Like, I understand what you're saying.
And listen, that could be the biggest setback someone has had. That could be the biggest disappointment of their life. And I don't take that away from them. But I would say this. If I get back up, I used to recruit for the state of Montana, which has a lot of wilderness education centers where students find themselves in having to leave a traditional high school because of severe behavioral challenges. And they get sent almost to like a wilderness boot camp of sorts, right? And reading those essays about the things that drove students to those camps, and I'm sure those high schools train those students on how to write these essays, it just put in context so differently when I would flip to the next essay, which is, I didn't get the lead role in the musical that I had my heart set on. And again, I'm not taking away the seriousness of that, but I would say to students to put your story in context. The most important thing about your essay is to be approachable, or kind of to connect with your reader, then to be well written, and then to be memorable. Those are the three things you're aiming for.
Yep.
It is not to be the most dramatic, most tear-jerking essay, because there's not many students a year that can actually write that one.
Well, and it's also that, like, you know, the goal is not for you to get sympathy your way into this college, right? Like, the goal is for you to
Mm-hmm.
really, talk, like, there should be a point to your story, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And so it's like, oh, well, I didn't
Mm-hmm.
get the part in the lead school play. And that made me realize that, like, I, was doing this for, like, the
You
wrong
got it.
reasons. And therefore I changed my focus to blah, blah, blah. And it explains part of
You
your
got
resume.
it.
Then it's, like, relevant, right? Or if it's
Mm-hmm.
something like, oh, that made me, I, like, doubled down and I, like, went to a bunch of, like, improv things and I, like, started, like, taking acting classes outside of school and I, like, blah, blah, blah. And then I got it later.
Yes.
Like, there's a point to it.
Mm-hmm. You got it. You're on track. So listeners, if you pick that one up, pick that up. Make sure it connects to something else, and then you're in a better spot.
Mm-hmm. Well, awesome. Anything else that we haven't covered yet that you want to make sure we chat about before we wrap up?
No, I feel like we got it. We got it all out. I feel good.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. This has been Shift, a college admissions podcast for a changing world, hosted by Tyler from Achievable, with Teege Mettille from EnrollML and the book, The Admissions Counselor's Malaise. And you can get a free trial of Achievable's ACT and CLT courses by going to achievable.me. Use the code podcast to get 10% off.